I still can't believe what happened at that party. It felt like I'd been thrown into a nightmare I couldn't escape from. It was supposed to be a casual get-together, just a small group of friends, drinks, music, the usual. Or at least that's what I was led to believe. My wife, Karen, had been unusually insistent about attending. At first, I didn't think much of it. She loves parties. She's always been the social one, while I'm more comfortable on the sidelines, nursing a drink and watching from a distance. But there was something different this time. It was in the way she talked about it, how excited she seemed, almost giddy. It was like she had something planned, something more than just a regular night out. The night of the party, I was already feeling off. Karen had spent hours getting ready, far more effort than she usually put into these things. When she finally came down the stairs, I was taken aback. She was wearing a dress I hadn't seen before, tight, black, and daring. It was the kind of thing you'd wear if you were trying to impress someone, and I had a gut feeling that someone wasn't me. "Wow, you look amazing," I managed to say, trying to hide the sinking feeling in my chest. She smiled, but it wasn't the warm, genuine smile I was used to. It felt hollow, like she was putting on a mask for me. "Thanks, babe," she replied. "I want tonight to be special." Special. That word stuck with me, gnawing at my insides as we got in the car. The drive over was tense, filled with small talk that didn't mean anything. I could tell she was distracted, her mind somewhere else entirely. We arrived at the party, and from the moment we walked in, I felt like an outsider. The vibe was different, more intense, more charged. Karen immediately disappeared into the crowd, laughing and hugging friends, while I grabbed a beer and found a quiet corner. I watched her from a distance. She was mingling, moving from group to group, her smile wide, her laugh too loud. I noticed the way she leaned into certain conversations, the way she touched the arm of a man I didn't recognize. He was tall, well-dressed, with an air of confidence I found irritating. They seemed too comfortable with each other. As the night wore on, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, like I was the only one not in on some inside joke. I decided to confront her about it. I waited until she was alone, finally catching her by the kitchen, a glass of wine in her hand. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual. "You've been busy tonight?" She glanced at me, her smile faltering for just a second before she recovered. "Yeah, it's a party, Jack. I'm just having fun." "Who's the guy you were talking to earlier?" I asked, unable to keep the edge out of my voice. Her eyes flashed with something I couldn't quite place. "Just a friend," she said, too quickly. "Why? Are you jealous?" The way she said it, the way she smirked at me, made my blood run cold. It wasn't a playful tease. Felt like a challenge. "Should I be?" I shot back, searching her face for any sign of remorse or guilt, but there was nothing. She shrugged, taking a long sip of her wine. "You'll see," she said cryptically, then turned and walked away, leaving me standing there, dumbfounded. "You'll see." What the hell was that supposed to mean? I tried to follow her, but she slipped into the crowd, and before I knew it, she was gone. I wandered through the rooms, feeling more and more like a stranger in my own life. I ended up outside, on the patio, leaning against the railing, staring into the dark, trying to make sense of everything. That's when I heard the laughter. It was Karen's laugh, but it sounded different, hushed, intimate. I turned and saw her, off in a shadowed corner, talking to that same guy from earlier. They were close, too close. Her hand was on his chest, and he was whispering something in her ear. My heart felt like it stopped in my chest. I wanted to look away, to pretend I hadn't seen it, but I couldn't. It was like watching a car crash in slow motion. Suddenly, she looked up, and our eyes met across the distance. She didn't pull away from him. She didn't look embarrassed or guilty. Instead, she gave me a small, knowing smile, almost like she was daring me to do something. I walked over, my fists clenched, the anger boiling inside me. "What's going on here?" I demanded, my voice low and dangerous. She didn't even flinch. "Oh, Jack," she said sweetly. "I was just about to come find you." "Find me? For what?" I snapped. The guy stepped back, raising his hands like he was backing away from a wild animal. "Maybe I should go," he muttered. No, stay, Karen said sharply, holding out her hand to him. Jack needs to see this. See what? I was practically shaking with rage. What the hell is going on? She stepped closer, her eyes gleaming with a strange excitement. I want you to watch, she said softly, almost seductively. I felt like the ground had opened up beneath me. What are you talking about? She leaned in, her lips brushing against my ear. I want you to watch me with him, she whispered. I want you to see what I've been wanting for a long time. I pushed her away, stumbling back in shock. Are you out of your mind? She just laughed. A cold, harsh sound. Maybe, she said. Or maybe I'm just tired of pretending. I looked at her, really looked at her, and realized I didn't know the woman standing in front of me anymore. This wasn't my wife. This was someone else entirely. I turned and walked away, not caring where I was going, just needing to get away. As I left, I could hear her laughter trailing after me, echoing in my head like the sound of everything I thought I knew shattering into a million pieces. I stormed out of that party, my mind a whirlwind of disbelief, anger, and something else. Something darker that I didn't want to admit. It wasn't just the shock of what Karen had said. It was the way she said it, with that cold, taunting smile. She wanted me to see it, wanted to shatter whatever was left of our marriage right in front of my eyes. The night was cold, and the biting wind did little to calm the storm raging inside me. I didn't know where I was going, just that I needed to get away from that house, away from the people who were likely all whispering about me now. I could imagine their smug faces, Karen's laughter echoing in the back of my mind. My feet carried me down the empty street, past rows of parked cars and the faint glow of streetlights, until I was a few blocks away, leaning against a brick wall, trying to catch my breath. I was furious, but there was more than just rage eating away at me. It was betrayal, yes, but also humiliation, a feeling of being made a fool in front of everyone. I pressed the heels of my hands into my eyes, trying to block out the images playing over and over in my head. Karen, smiling up at that guy, her hand on his chest, her eyes daring me to do something about it. I didn't even realize how much time had passed until I heard the sound of heels clicking against the pavement. I looked up and there she was, Karen, walking toward me as if she hadn't just ripped my heart out in front of a room full of strangers. Her face was flushed, whether from the cold or the excitement of what she'd done. I couldn't tell. Jack, wait, she called out, her voice breathless. I didn't answer. I turned away, staring at the empty street, trying to ignore the sharp sting of her perfume as she got closer. Jack, please, she said again, stepping in front of me, blocking my path. Just listen to me. Listen to you? I spat, my voice louder than I intended. After what you just said back there, you want me to listen to you? Yes, she insisted, grabbing my arm. Her grip was tight, almost desperate. I meant what I said. I want you to watch. The shock hit me all over again, as fresh and raw as when she first whispered it in my ear. I yanked my arm away, feeling the urge to lash out, to yell, to break something. Anything to release the pressure building inside me. You're insane, I said, shaking my head. This isn't you, Karen. What the hell is wrong with you? She took a step closer, her eyes boring into mine, full of a strange intensity one had never seen before. It wasn't anger or even guilt. It was something else entirely, desperation, maybe. No, Jack. This is me, she said quietly. This is what I've wanted for a long time, and I need you to be part of it. I laughed bitterly, a harsh, humorless sound that echoed down the empty street. You need me to be part of it? You're talking about dragging me into some sick, twisted fantasy like it's a game. It's not a game, she said sharply, her voice rising. This is real. This is what I want, and I thought, she hesitated, biting her lip. I thought you might want it too. I stared at her, stunned into silence. Did she really believe that? Did she actually think I would want to watch her with another man, like it was something that could bring us closer together? I felt a wave of nausea roll through me. You're out of your mind, I said, turning away, ready to leave her there on the sidewalk. She grabbed my arm again, harder this time, digging her nails into my skin. Please, Jack, she begged. Her voice cracked, and I glanced back at her. There were tears in her eyes now, but they didn't soften the look of determination on her face. Just come back inside. If you don't like it, if it's too much, we'll stop. Promise? I shook my head, pulling my arm free. Too much? This is already too much, Karen. You've crossed a line you can't uncross. She took a deep breath, wiping at her eyes with the back of her hand. You don't understand, she said quietly. This is something I've needed, something I've been craving, and I couldn't keep it inside anymore. Something you've needed? I asked, my voice dripping with disbelief. And what about me, Karen? Did you even think about what this would do to me, to us? She flinched, looking away for a moment before meeting my eyes again. Yes, she said, her voice small but firm. I thought about it every single day. And that's why I wanted you to see it, Jack. Because I still love you, and I want you to be a part of this with me. I laughed again, the sound more like a sob this time. You have a funny way of showing love, I muttered. Please, she whispered, stepping closer. So close I could feel the heat of her body against mine. Just give me this one chance to show you. If you still hate me after, then fine. We can walk away, and I won't ever bring it up again. I wanted to say no. I wanted to tell her to go to hell and walk away without looking back. But as I stood there, staring at her tear-streaked face, something inside me crumbled. Despite everything, despite the betrayal and the humiliation, a small part of me still wanted to understand why. I needed to know why the woman I had loved for so many years had become this stranger in front of me. Fine, I said finally, the word heavy on my tongue. One chance. Her face lit up, a relieved smile spreading across her lips. Thank you, she breathed, reaching up to touch my face, but I flinched away. Don't thank me, I snapped. Let's just get this over with. She nodded, wiping away the last of her tears. Okay, she whispered. Okay. We walked back to the party in silence, her hand brushing against mine, but I couldn't bring myself to hold it. My mind was racing, a mix of fear, anger, and something else. Something I didn't want to name. We entered the house, and the noise hit me like a wave. Laughter, music, the clinking of glasses. It was as if nothing had happened, as if the world hadn't just shifted beneath my feet. Karen led me through the crowd, her hand now gripping mine tightly, like she was afraid I might bolt at any moment. Couldn't blame her. I felt like a caged animal, every instinct screaming at me to run, but I forced myself to follow her, to see whatever twisted thing she had planned. We reached a door at the back of the house. She paused, looking back at me with a nervous smile. Are you ready? She asked. No, I said flatly, but I nodded anyway. She took a deep breath and pushed the door open, stepping inside. I followed her, the door closing behind us with a soft click that sounded like a final nail in the coffin. As the door clicked shut behind us, the noise from the party faded into a muffled hum. I stood there in the dimly lit room, trying to make sense of what was happening. It was a guest bedroom, one I vaguely remembered from a few gatherings we'd hosted here in the past. Now, though, it felt different. The air was thick with an energy I couldn't quite place, a tension that clung to my skin like humidity. Karen's hand slipped from mine, and she turned to face me, her eyes searching mine for some kind of approval or acceptance. I had nothing to give her. I was still numb, reeling from everything she'd said outside. I couldn't wrap my head around it. This wasn't the woman I knew or thought I knew. This wasn't the woman I'd built a life with. Jack, she said softly, breaking the silence. I need you to trust me. Trust you. I scoffed, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. You're asking for trust after what you just told me? After what you want me to do? She flinched at the sharpness in my voice, but she didn't back down. Instead, she stepped closer, her face pleading. I know how it sounds. I know it's insane, but I need you to try. I need you to just let go. Let go of what? I snapped. My dignity? My marriage? What exactly am I supposed to let go of, Karen? She closed her eyes, taking a deep breath as if gathering her courage. When she opened them again, they were filled with something raw and vulnerable that I hadn't seen in years. Let go of the control, she whispered. Let go of the expectations. Just for tonight. Just for once. I stared at her, feeling the crack widen between us, like a fault line splitting open right under our feet. And if I don't? I asked, my voice rough with barely restrained emotion. What happens if I don't play along with this twisted fantasy of yours? Her lips parted, but she didn't say anything for a long moment. Then she looked down, her voice barely above a whisper. Then I guess we're done. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I took a step back, feeling like I'd been winded. You're giving me an ultimatum? I asked, incredulous. You're saying our entire marriage depends on this? On me standing here and watching you with another man? It's not just about that, she said, her voice breaking. It's about everything we've lost, Jack. It's about finding something real again, something raw. I felt like I've been suffocating. And this is the only way I know to feel alive again. Alive? I barked out a laugh, a hollow, humorless sound. You need to humiliate me to feel alive? She flinched again, and I almost regretted the harshness of my words. Almost. But before I could say anything else, there was a knock on the door. It was light, tentative, but it felt like a gunshot in the silence between us. Karen's eyes flicked toward the door, and I saw it, the shift in her demeanor. It was like a switch had flipped. Her expression softened, a small smile playing on her lips, and my stomach dropped. I already knew who it was before she even opened the door. The man stepped inside, the same one I'd seen her with earlier. He looked more confident now, more relaxed, like he knew exactly what was about to happen and was completely at ease with it. He nodded at me, a small, polite gesture that only made my blood boil. Jack, Karen said softly, her voice gentle like she was soothing a child. This is Ben. I clenched my fists at my sides, trying to keep my composure. I don't care who he is, I bit out. What the hell is he doing here? Ben stepped forward, his hands raised in a placating gesture. Look, man, I get it, he said, his tone calm, almost sympathetic. This is weird. It's not something anyone plans for, but Karen and I... Shut up, I snapped, taking a step toward him. I didn't want to hear his voice. I didn't want to see his face. You don't get to talk to me. You don't get to explain anything. Karen placed a hand on my chest, gently pushing me back. Jack, please, she said, her voice firm but soothing. Just listen. No, I shouted, shaking her hand off. You expect me to stand here and watch this? To watch you with him? Have you lost your goddamn mind? Her eyes softened, filling with something that almost looked like pity. I'm asking you to try, she whispered. For us? For us? I repeated, my voice cracking. There is no us if you go through with this. She held my gaze, her expression resolute. There already isn't, she said quietly. Not the way things are now. Not if we keep pretending. I felt like the floor was dropping out from under me, like I was in freefall. I looked between her and Ben, trying to make sense of the madness, trying to find some sliver of the woman I once knew. But she wasn't there. This was someone else entirely. Karen stepped back, giving me space, her eyes still locked on mine. I need this, Jack, she said softly. I need you to see me, the real me, and if you can't, if you won't, then we're already over. My heart pounded in my chest, the room spinning around me. I felt like I was on the edge of a cliff, staring down into the abyss. I wanted to turn and leave, to walk away and never look back. But I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Fine, I whispered, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. If this is what you want, if this is what it takes, then fine. I'll watch. Karen's eyes softened, a look of relief passing over her face. She stepped closer to Ben, her hand resting on his chest, and I felt the first tear slip down my cheek, hot and burning. I forced myself to stay where I was, rooted to the spot, as she leaned in and kissed him. It was slow, deliberate, and it shattered whatever was left of my heart. He responded, pulling her closer, his hands roaming her back, and she let out a soft moan, the sound cutting through me like a knife. I felt like I was watching from outside my own body, detached, numb. They pulled apart, and Karen turned to look at me, her lips swollen, her breath heavy. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice tender, almost loving. I met her eyes, seeing a stranger looking back at me. "No," I said, my voice hollow. "But I'm still here." She nodded, a sad smile on her lips. "That's all I need," she whispered. And then she turned back to him, and I watched as she let go completely. I stood there, frozen, as the scene unfolded in front of me. It felt like I was trapped in some surreal nightmare, watching my entire life crumble while I did nothing to stop it. Karen and this man, Ben, moved together with a familiarity that twisted my gut into knots. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment thing. This had been planned, maybe even rehearsed. My mind raced, trying to piece together all the moments I'd missed, all the signs I'd ignored. How long had this been going on? How many nights had she come home to me, smiling, kissing me goodnight, while secretly craving someone else? The thought made me sick. Karen turned her head slightly, her eyes meeting mine for a brief second. There was a flicker of something there. Fear, uncertainty, maybe even a plea for understanding. But it disappeared as quickly as it had come. She pressed herself closer against Ben, her hands sliding down his chest, and I felt a surge of white-hot anger flood through me. "You're really going through with this," I said, my voice barely more than a whisper. I wasn't sure if I was asking her or accusing her. Karen looked at me again, her expression softening for a moment. "Yes," she said simply, almost sadly. "I need you to see this, Jack. I need you to understand." "Understand?" I repeated, my voice cracking. "You want me to understand you betraying me in front of my own eyes? What kind of sick, twisted idea is that, Karen?" She bit her lip, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "It's not about betrayal," she insisted. "It's about honesty. It's about being real, Jack. We've been lying to each other for years, pretending everything is fine when it's not." "You think this is honesty?" I barked, gesturing wildly to the two of them. "You think this is going to fix anything?" Ben, who had been silent up until now, stepped forward, his hand resting gently on Karen's shoulder. "Jack," he began, his voice calm, soothing, like he was talking to a child. "This isn't about hurting you. It's about giving Karen what she needs, what she's been missing." I lunged at him before I even realized what I was doing, my fist swinging wildly. He barely dodged in time, stumbling back against the wall, his eyes wide with surprise. Karen jumped between us, her hands on my chest, pushing me back. "Stop!" she shouted, her voice raw. "This isn't what I want. Please, Jack, don't make this harder than it already is." I stepped back, breathing hard, my fists still clenched at my sides. "You've got a hell of a way of showing what you want," I snarled. "You want me to watch you, have sex with him? Right here? Right now? Is that it?" Karen's face softened, her expression almost tender. "Yes," she said quietly. "I need you to see it. I need you to understand that this isn't about choosing him over you. It's about finding something I've lost. And I want you to be part of it." I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound that scraped against my throat. "You're insane," I muttered. "You've lost your damn mind." "Maybe I have," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "But I need this, Jack. I need you to stay. I need you to watch." The words hung between us like a challenge. I wanted to walk out, to slam the door behind me and never look back. But something kept me there, rooted to the spot, as if my feet were glued to the floor. Maybe it was the morbid curiosity, the need to see just how far she was willing to go. Or maybe it was something deeper, something darker inside me that I didn't want to acknowledge. "Fine," I said, my voice cold and flat. "You want me to watch? Then go ahead. Show me." Karen's breath hitched, her eyes searching mine for any sign of hesitation, any chance I might change my mind. When she found none, she took a deep breath and turned back to Ben. He looked at her, his face softening, and leaned in to kiss her. I forced myself to watch, every second feeling like a blade slicing into me. Their kiss was slow, intimate, filled with a kind of passion I hadn't seen from Karen in years. I felt like I was standing outside of my own body, watching as a stranger's life fell apart. Ben's hands moved to her waist, pulling her closer, and she responded eagerly, arching against him, her fingers threading through his hair. I could see the way her body relaxed against his, the way she melted into his touch. It was a kind of ease and comfort that I hadn't seen from her in a long time, and it hurt more than I could put into words. "Karen," I said, my voice breaking. "How long?" She pulled away from Ben, her lips swollen, her breath coming in short, ragged gasps. "A year," she admitted, not meeting my eyes. "We've been seeing each other for a year. A year. An entire year of lies, of deception." I felt like the ground was crumbling beneath my feet. Couldn't breathe. "You could have told me," I said, my voice barely more than a whisper. "You could have said something, anything, before it got to this." She looked at me then, her eyes filled with a strange mixture of sorrow and relief. "I didn't know how," she said. "I didn't know how to tell you that I needed this, that I needed something more." I swallowed hard, the lump in my throat almost choking me. "And now?" I asked, my voice raw. "What happens now?" Karen stepped back, looking between me and Ben, her expression unreadable. "Now," she said slowly, "you decide, Jack. You decide if you can handle this, if you can accept this part of me." My legs felt weak, like they might give out at any moment. I leaned against the wall, closing my eyes, trying to block out the image of them together. But it was burned into my mind, etched there forever. "I don't know," I whispered. "I don't know if I can." Ben stepped back, giving us space, but Karen didn't move. She reached out, her hand hovering just inches from my face. "I still love you," she said, her voice cracking. "I need you to know that." I opened my eyes, looking into hers, searching for any trace of the woman I once knew. But all I saw was a stranger staring back at me, a stranger who had destroyed everything we'd built together. "Then why does it feel like you're saying goodbye?" I asked, the tears finally spilling over. "Maybe I am," she whispered. "Or maybe I'm giving us a chance to start over, to be honest, for once." I shook my head, the tears blurring my vision. "I don't know if I want that kind of honesty," I said, my voice hollow. She didn't answer, just stood there, waiting for me to make the next move. And for the first time, I had no idea what to do. I stood there, the last of my resistance crumbling away, as if every shred of anger and betrayal was being stripped from me, leaving me raw and exposed. My breathing was heavy, labored, like I had just run a marathon. But it wasn't exhaustion I felt. It wasn't even the pain that had consumed me only moments before. It was something darker, something I'd never allowed myself to feel. I looked at Karen, standing there, her lips still swollen from kissing another man. There was a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes, like she didn't know if she'd pushed me too far this time. But beneath that, I could see it. The hunger, the wild, burning desire she hadn't shown me in years. And something in me snapped. The pain was still there, of course, but it had twisted into something else, something almost exhilarating. It was like a rush of adrenaline, flooding my veins with heat. I had never felt anything like it before. This strange, intoxicating mix of jealousy, desire, and the raw, primal need to claim what was mine. It was wild, uncontrollable, and I couldn't push it away even if I wanted to. I took a step toward her, and Karen's eyes widened. I could see the realization dawning on her face. She knew I wasn't about to walk out. Not anymore. She had wanted me to stay, to watch, and now she was about to get exactly what she asked for. "You want me to watch?" I said, my voice low, almost a growl. I could barely recognize it as my own. Karen swallowed hard, her gaze flicking between me and Ben. "Yes," she whispered. "I want you to watch. I want you to see everything." I let out a slow breath, feeling the tension in my body unwind, replaced by a simmering heat I hadn't felt in years. "Then show me," I said, taking another step closer, my eyes locked on hers. "Show me what you've been craving so badly." Her lips parted, a soft gasp escaping her, and I saw the desire flare in her eyes. She turned to Ben, pulling him closer, and this time I didn't flinch. I watched as she kissed him, deeper this time, her hands sliding down his back, her fingers digging into his shirt. He responded eagerly, his hands gripping her hips, pulling her against him. I felt the jealousy rise, sharp and hot, but instead of pulling away from it, I let it consume me. I leaned against the wall, crossing my arms, my gaze never leaving them. It was like a fire burning inside me, but it didn't hurt. It felt good, thrilling even. I could feel my own desire building, stronger than it had been in years. It was twisted, I knew that, but it was real. For the first time in a long time, everything felt real. Karen broke the kiss, her breath coming in quick, shallow gasps. She looked back at me, searching my face for any sign of hesitation. I met her gaze, unflinching, and nodded once, slowly. "Keep going," I said, my voice rough. Ben seemed to hesitate, looking at me with something like confusion, but Karen didn't wait. She reached down, tugging at the hem of his shirt, pulling it over his head. His chest was bare now, muscles taut and defined. I felt another pang of jealousy, but it only fueled the fire burning inside me. Karen ran her hands down his chest, her nails grazing his skin, and I could see the way he shivered under her touch. It was a sight I never thought I'd see. My wife openly seducing another man, right in front of me. And instead of feeling disgusted, I felt a dark, powerful thrill rush through me. I realized then that I wanted this. I wanted to see her like this, uninhibited, wild, taking what she wanted without apology. It was like a side of her I had never seen before, a side she had hidden from me all these years, and it made me want her even more. Karen's eyes met mine again, and I could see the surprise there, the flicker of something like disbelief. She had expected me to fight, to leave, to yell. But I wasn't going anywhere. Not now. Not when I was finally seeing the truth. "You like this, don't you?" she whispered, her voice husky with desire. I felt a slow, twisted smile spread across my lips. "Yes," I said simply. "I do." Her eyes darkened, and I could see the excitement there, the way it spurred her on. She turned back to Ben, pushing him down onto the bed, straddling him. He looked up at her, his hands running up her thighs, and she let out a soft, breathy moan that sent a shiver down my spine. I felt like an intruder, but at the same time, I felt like I was finally part of something I'd been shut out of for years. The connection, the intimacy, it was there, but it wasn't just between her and Ben. It was between her and me too. She was showing me everything, bearing her deepest desires, and I couldn't look away. Ben's hands moved to the straps of her dress, slowly pulling them down. Karen's eyes fluttered shut, her head tilting back, and I watched, entranced, as he kissed her neck, his lips trailing down her collarbone. She shivered, her body arching toward him, and I could see the way she lost herself in it, completely letting go. It was beautiful in a way I never could have imagined. I had thought it would tear me apart, seeing her like this, but instead, it was doing the opposite. It was pulling me in, making me feel closer to her than I had in years. I could feel my own desire surging, raw and primal, and I didn't try to hide it. Karen's eyes opened, and she looked at me, her gaze dark and heated. "Come closer," she said, her voice barely more than a whisper. I moved toward the bed, standing right at the edge, looking down at them. I could see the question in her eyes, the uncertainty. She was still testing me, still unsure if I would turn away. But I didn't. I reached out, my hand trembling slightly, and cupped her face, brushing my thumb across her cheek. "You're beautiful," I whispered, and it wasn't a lie. It was the truest thing I'd said in a long time. Her eyes softened, and for a moment, it was just the two of us. The anger, the betrayal, it was still there, but it had twisted into something different, something we could both feel. I leaned down, kissing her softly, and she melted against me, her hands tangling in my hair. When I pulled back, she was breathless, her eyes glazed with desire. "Stay," she whispered. "Stay and watch." I nodded, a slow, deliberate nod. "I'm not going anywhere," I said, and for the first time I meant it.